Boys, what's good? It's Herm, and we're back with a series that you guys really liked last year, 30 teams in 30 days. Throughout the month of September, we'll be previewing every team for the 2025 NBA season, and we're going alphabetical. So we're starting off with the Atlanta Hawks, and they have started a rebuild. They're entering their rebuild. Some people might call it a retool. They traded former All-Star Dejounte Murray. It is now Trae Young's backcourt solely once again, and they are entering a different stage of what their team looks like. It is going to be a very different Hawks team this season from last season, and let's just get into the preview. But before we do, think about subscribing. It's free, it's easy, and if you don't like the content, you can always unsubscribe later. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. So, let's talk about last season first, because we need to get the context for this season before we end with what this year will look like. So in 2024, the Hawks finished 36-46, which was good enough for 10th place in the Eastern Conference, but was a 5-game dip from the season prior. They had one All-Star in Trae Young and had two 20-point-per-game scorers in Trae Young and Dejounte Murray. They lost 3 straight games 7 different times, which is kind of impressive, including 5 straight to end the season. It was a rough look for Atlanta, and many times they just kept losing again and again. A lot of people talking about it, how they were kind of disappointing, because a lot of people had pegged them as a playoff team in their first full year under head coach Quinn Snyder, but that wasn't the case. It was the last year with the Trae Young and Dejounte Murray experiment as they broke it up this offseason, and they ended the season by losing the 9-10 play-in game to the Chicago Bulls, and their season was over. It was the first full year with Quinn Snyder, and people thought that would help. One person it seemed like it definitely helped was Jalen Johnson, who got a ton more minutes, and he really showed out, jumping from 5 points per game in his second season to 16 points per game last year. But now let's look at their offseason, as there were a lot of moves around this Hawks franchise. They lost point guard Dejounte Murray, trading him to the New Orleans Pelicans. Saddiq Bey left in free agency. They traded AJ Griffin, who had a really good rookie season for them, I believe in 2023, and then just didn't really get minutes last year. So they trade him, and Bruno Fernando leaves in free agency as well. They added Zaccharie Risacher with the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. Dyson Daniels they got for Dejounte Murray, as well as Larry Nance and Cody Zeller in that deal. They traded for David Roddy from Phoenix, and they signed Dominic Barlow, who I thought looked pretty good in small stretches with San Antonio last season. So there are definitely a lot of guys coming in, but the best player is obviously the one going out in Dejounte Murray. So a lot of people would call this a retool, but to me, I think it's a rebuild, and that comes from the Hawks CEO Steve Koonin, who was asked about the team this week on August 30th, I believe the quote was, and his answer to me paints an interesting picture about the direction of the team. I think we're going to be long, we're going to be athletic, we're going to be very young, and I think this team is going to be an incredible amount of fun. Didn't mention winning there. He said that on August 30th, and there's a good chance Trae Young is our oldest starter at 26 years old. So that clearly points out a couple people. Clint Capela, who's 30, Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's 32, and DeAndre Hunter, who is a few months older than Trae Young, but is 26. Trae's 25 right now, will be 26 when the season starts, birthday in September. But after trading Dejounte this offseason, the team could now be moving away from these other guys, at least as starters, and maybe trading them as well further on. These are winning guys. Clint Capela's definitely gotten worse, but Bogdan, a very good player. DeAndre Hunter quietly had like the best season of his career last season, but now it seems like they might not really view these guys as a priority for the team, and they're focusing on the youth. So it might not be winning, it might be more about development in Atlanta. But let's get into the guys that make this team what they are, and we'll start off with the starters. Trae Young will be the oldest of the guys projected as the starters because of the comments from the CEO. Let's start off with Trae Young, the 5th overall pick all the way back in 2018, a 25-year-old star point guard, 26 points per game last season, nearly 11 assists, and nearly 3 rebounds, about a steal and a half per game. He is now a 3-time All-Star. He declined to be an injury reserve in 2023, accepted it this past season. Could be like a 4-time All-Star. He's been very good since he's gotten into the league. An elite passer, I'd probably say a top 3 passer in the league. with Tyrese Halliburton and some other guys up there, and he's one of the best scorers in the league as well. I think he'll look better as the undisputed point guard again. It kind of looked like him and Dejounte Murray were doing a little bit of my turn, your turn, and now they won't have to do that. Trae is the point guard of this team. The ball handling will be mostly done by him, and he will be the one initiating the offense. I think he felt obligated to let Dejounte do that at times, and I think it hurt his production, so we could see a better version of Trae this season. And the jump in three-point percentage was very promising, because despite being known as a great shooter, in 2023 shot just 33.5% from three, but that was back up over 37 last season, and I think that's a big sign that we're back to a solid shooting Trae Young and what we want to see. 37% on the amount of volume, I'm perfectly okay with. And now let's get into what the other starters might be, because it's Trae Young and then it's kind of everybody else. Trae Young is the clear best player on this team, and the rest of the talent isn't quite at the same level. At shooting guard, I think it'll be Dyson Daniels, a guy that they acquired in the Dejounte Murray deal, the 8th overall pick in 2022. Still just 21 years old, is a guard, but can play some forward as well. I believe he's 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in that range. And he's a long, very big wingspan guy, can defend basically 1 through 4, so he's going to be a valuable kind of Swiss Army knife for the Hawks this year. 6 points per game, 3 assists, and 4 rebounds in 22 minutes per game for New Orleans last season. Hasn't got an opportunity to be a really big piece of a team yet, but in Atlanta I think we'll see that, and they're hoping he can capitalize on it. About a steal and a half for Dyson as well. A very good perimeter defender, and the biggest thing that I think makes him a better fit next to Trae than Dejounte, because Dejounte was touted as a good defender. If you watched him last year, he wasn't. Dyson will be a better defender, but the big thing is that he can play alongside other ball handlers. He doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time. He will be more than willing to defer to Trae Young and can be very complimentary in that his defense helps make up for Trae's lack of. But Trae's defense better last season. I think that is a big thing that not enough people talked about. Trae Young is kind of at least a passable-ish defender at this point, but Dyson is going to be a very good one, and I think he's going to complement Trae very well. He came off a good Olympics this summer with Australia, was a big piece of that team, but the biggest thing with Dyson is the shooting has to improve. 31% from 3 in the league as a guard today just isn't passable. That's not something you can have happen. He needs to be better for the team to have spacing and for Quinn Snyder to be able to give him heavy minutes as a potential starter. At small forward, I think it's the number 1 overall pick. I think it's Zaccharie Risacher. Maybe he doesn't start the season as a starter. Maybe it's DeAndre Hunter. But Risacher will be a starter, I believe, for the majority of this season. 19 years old, a 3-and-D type forward. In the Euro Cup last year with JL Borg, his stats were a little better than his kind of season stats, but I look at the Euro Cup, I think it's good competition. So 13 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist in 17 games with them. And the biggest thing that stood out in that Euro Cup was 56% from 3 on 3.5 attempts per game. I obviously don't think that is something that can keep up at the NBA level, but if he can shoot somewhere from 40 to 45%, that'll make him an extremely valuable player for this Hawks team. He's a solid defender, another guy who can do pretty much 1 through 4. Is a little too light right now to guard 5s. I think he could put on a little weight, as that is probably the biggest weakness I see right now, is that he could get pushed around a little bit, but he will provide very valuable spacing if the shooting is legit. It was the best shooting stretch of his entire life, has never been that level of shooter at different points, but if you buy that the shooting is something that has grown and is a part of his game, then he's going to be a really good player. Could be what they thought they were getting with DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish as 3-and-D wings who would be very valuable next to Trae, and I think when I watch him, there are some Michael Porter Jr. flashes. He's not going to be a creator for other players, but can make tough shots, can space the floor, can play some defense, and that level of guy would be super helpful for this Hawks team, and if Risacher can become that, then he will be very, very valuable. At the 4 spot, we have Jalen Johnson, a player I really like. I said he could be the key replacement for John Collins last season, and that is definitely what he was. Stepped up in a big way and was a huge contributor for Atlanta last season. 20th overall pick after somewhat disappointing at Duke. Was a very high school recruit, and the talent is obviously there. 22 years old, athletic freak, and I think he has star upside. side. 16 points per game last season and nearly 9 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game as well, and over a steal per game. He's a pretty solid defender on forwards, and he puts other defenders that are guarding him on posters regularly. He'll dunk on anyone, he gets out in the fast break, and he throws down on people, and he's just super fun to watch. 36% from 3 last season was the best of his career so far, I believe, in year 3, and in year 4 maybe that jumps to 38%, and I think that will be huge for his game because he's so hard to stop going downhill. If you have to respect the jumper as well, he's going to be so difficult to guard. His scoring numbers, I think, could take even another leap thanks to Dejounte Murray's exit. I think it's very unlikely he makes the All-Star team in 2025 despite the talent, just because of like the level of team they'll be, but could be a 20 plus point per game guy and 10 plus rebounds, and it's just really good production I would like to see. He was, I believe, top 5 in most improved voting last season, and if he can take another leap, I think he could win that award this year as well. So the last spot is one that is kind of up for debate. Some people still think it'll be Capela, but due to the CEO's comments, I think it's probably center Onyeka Okongwu starting at the 5. Was the 6th overall pick in 2020, is 23 years old now, 10 points, 7 rebounds, about an assist and a half, and over a block per game last season, and like 25-ish minutes, something like that. So over 60% from the field, is a very good rebounder and rim protector, is a presence around the rim on both sides of the floor, but has never been given the full-time starter spot. It's always been Capela's, and I think that's held him back. He's been seen as the Capela replacement for years now, but he hasn't been able to kind of usurp him as the starting 5, but it seems like this could be the year. And the biggest question is going to be, is there more to his game than we've been shown thus far? With more opportunity, can he take a big leap? Can he be a 15-8, 15-10 type guy? And that would make him much more valuable. But if he can just be an average starting 5 at what you're paying him, I think it's better than what they had with Capela, and then they could move on from Clint. Then we move into the reserves, some other guys I think are important to the team, starting off with Bogdan Bogdanovic, who was really good for Serbia in the Olympics this year as well. 32-year-old bucket getter, that's what he is more than anything else. He's a very good scorer off the bench. Nearly 17 points per game last season, 3.5 rebounds and 3 assists, 1.2 steals per game as well. Shot 37% from 3, pretty solid. Set a career high in scoring last season. The nearly 17 was the highest mark of his career, and according to him, he would rather close games than start them, so he's going to be okay with coming off the bench, being in that bench type role. So the comments from the CEO, all that type of stuff, I don't think it's going to bother Bogdan. I think he's going to be happy to be there and is going to be a top 3 player on this team. I think that's pretty clear. And he's one of the best 6 men in the game today. I'd say he's a top 3 to 5 6 man in the league right now, and he's just super valuable, and he could be a very high value trade piece at the deadline. If they're underperforming, if they're not going to make the play-in pretty clearly, they could move off Bogdan, get a ton of value, because contenders need guys like this. So if they do that, I think they could get a lot back, and it seems like that is probably a likely outcome. Then we move into point guard Kobe Buffkin, a second-year guy, the 15th overall pick in 2023, a 20-year-old point guard, 15 points per 36, 6 rebounds and 5 assists, all those per 36 numbers, and 1.3 steals as well. So when he was on the floor, he was producing, and he's now the clear backup point guard, unless you think it's Trent Forrest. But to me, I think it's pretty obviously Kobe Buffkin as the backup 1, and that places a lot of responsibility on him. He struggled to find the court in his rookie season last year, only playing in 17 games, spending a lot of time in the G League. He showed flashes when he was on the court, but the efficiency needs to get better. It was like 33% from the field, 23% from 3. It's just not sustainable, but I don't think those are the level of efficiency he is. I just think he was going through a rough patch, which shooters will have. His level of play could make or break the bench unit for this team, because the plus-minus splits with Trae on and off the floor, the on-off numbers, if Buffkin can't produce, could be really, really bad, just because they wouldn't have the playmaking or the initiator to start the offense. It could be really rough if Trae if Buffkin, isn't a good backup one. So there's a lot more pressure on him than I think people would like to say, but I also think Buffkin has a lot of upside. I really liked him coming into the draft, and I thought he could be a solid guard, whether it's at the 2 spot or the 1 spot. But we'll see what he ends up being this season. I think his role will be important. Then we have DeAndre Hunter, small forward, 4th overall pick in 2019, part of the famous Anthony Davis deal, I believe. Kind of eventually, because the Lakers had the 4th pick and then they dealt it to Atlanta. A 26-year-old forward at this point, getting a little older. He's just been in the league a while at this point. 15.5 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists last season. Also shot 39% from 3 if you round it. He was really solid. He was just a good player last year and quietly had a very solid season. I didn't hear people talking about DeAndre Hunter like it was this resurgent season. He's not a bust. He's a good player and he's making an impact. You just didn't hear that. But when you look at the numbers, his performance was pretty solid. He needs to prove he can stay on the floor. Injuries have been a consistent issue throughout his career, and he missed 25 games last year as well. Needs to prove that the shooting is legit because it has never been at that level, and revive the defense that we saw early on, because when he was drafted, he was a supposed 3-and-D player, and the defense was a huge aspect of his game, but I just don't think it's quite at the level that we saw early on, and maybe with more of a bigger role, he would buy into that, but the defense needs to get back there, and he's running out of chances to make himself a cornerstone member of this team. They've wanted him to be a big piece, but in his 5 years in the league now, he just hasn't cemented himself as a part of the Hawks core, really. So this is one of the last chances he's going to get, and hopefully he can capitalize on that. Let's get into the projected lineup for this season. Again, I think the starters will be Trae, Dyson, Risacher, Jalen, and Okongwu. Then off the bench, the second unit, you have Kobe Buffkin, Bogdan Bogdanovic, DeAndre Hunter, Larry Nance Jr., and Clint Capela, with David Roddy, Dominic Barlow, and Cody Zeller also potentially seeing some minutes as well. Nikola Jurisic is an interesting rookie, but I don't know if he'll get really all that many minutes. But to me, this is the likely projected lineup for Atlanta. Then we get into the last part, what to expect from them in 2025. On the low end, I think they could be in for somewhat of a regression, maybe drop from 36 wins to something like 30, 31, 32, somewhere in there, and miss the play-in tournament entirely. On my deeper analytics stuff, I have them projected as the 9th team, so they would be in the play-in, but likely outside of the playoff picture. I think the top 8 teams are kind of locked into playoff berths unless something goes crazy, but we'll see what that ends up being like. On the high end, I think they ride the youth and improvements from key guys to a surprise playoff berth, likely in the 6 to 8 range. I think that's the best you could see from them. Last year, I said their high end was a top 4 seed with Quinn Snyder there. I just don't see that level of upside from the Hawks this season, and maybe they'll prove me wrong again and they'll be really good. But at this point, I just think they're probably a play-in team or right outside of that. The coaching in year 2 from Quinn Snyder should have the team looking more like a unit. I really like Quinn as a head coach. I think he was great in Utah, and I think at some point in Atlanta, it's going to show how good of a coach he is, and hopefully we'll see that this year. I expect jumps from guys like Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, and Onyeka Okongwu. Probably one all-star in Trae. Even if Jalen plays at that level, I don't think he'll make it. I just can't see Atlanta getting 2 all-star selections, but I talked about that earlier. Expect the best season we've seen from Trae Young yet. I really think this, as more responsibility falls in his hands maybe than ever before. The supporting cast isn't what we've seen at other points. We could see a 30-ish point per game season and 12 plus assists per game as well. With guys like Jalen and Okongwu being threats around the rim, he could be a candidate to lead the league in assists. Regardless of exactly what happens with this team, they're going to be fun and they're going to play really fast, get up to court, and just be one of those league pass teams that you want to check in even if they're not great, because I think they're going to be a good time. But that is the Atlanta Hawks for 2025. Watch out for Trae, Jalen, Risacher is going to be interesting, and hopefully Dyson Daniels can be a key piece. I like Dyson, and I hope he can take a step forward with Atlanta. But thanks for watching. Again, think about subscribing. I appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. It'll be Boston tomorrow, and then I believe Brooklyn the day after that. So we'll be getting into that. Hopefully you enjoyed. But hey, thanks for watching. Have a good one. Peace.